So, hello, everybody. How we doing? Hope everybody's having a great day. This is 50 Pips, rocking and rolling, 18th/01/2016. No trade calls or recommendations. Every response for their own stuff. We're here for educational purposes only. And the fact that you're in here means you've read, you understand, you accept all the disclosure disclaimers on the website, understanding that we're just performing some live tech analysis in a learning context for educational purposes only. So guys, just a quiet day, nothing planned, nothing particular. So thanks to everybody who retweeted it, the invitation that I put out on Twitter, very much appreciated. The more the merrier. So there's no specific agenda for today. I've just settled, it's a quiet day. We can hang around for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, as long as we need to. There is nothing on the agenda. First come, first serve. Nothing's off the table. You can ask me anything you want to talk about, whether it's traded relating, I don't know, screen setup, currency pairs, indexes. If it's on this FX Pro demo, we'll put the chart up. So shoot, let's play it as we used to in the old times. First come, first serve. So that anybody can ask any pair. The first one that's going to come through, I'll start reviewing, and I'll take the questions one in chronological order as they come in. I hope everybody's having a great day, by the way. I hope everybody's had a great weekend. And again, let's get cracking. Yeah, sure. I think this is a lot of people have been discussing this, and a lot of people are worrying, well, discussing what's going on crude, right? So yeah, don't be shy. You can ask whatever you want, and nobody can see the questions. I'm the only one that can see the questions, so nobody else is going to see them. So don't worry about them. Hey, good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. So yeah, so crude. What's going on crude? So a lot of people are calling for this to completely crumble, to go back into the 20s, etc., etc. What's going on here? Now, again, in terms of asymmetric risk reward, clearly we would favor trying to play the upside rather than the downside, right? Also, because if you look at commodities, to a certain extent, there is a natural floor, right? Most likely they're not going to go to zero. There's a certain point where people either stop planting, stop producing, stop drilling, and demand supply balance out, and prices start to recuperate. Here it's not really so much, as far as we're concerned, purely technical. Here there's just a lot of fear-related selling. There's a lot of people that have margin calls, etc., etc. We've got the Iran news, so we'll have to see what happens. I think what a lot of people are looking at here is a completion of this final move. So if you see this this move up here, we've had a retracement following this breakdown, right, to pretty much 50 back. So a lot of people are looking for some kind of a symmetrical move to play out and to finish out, and that'll probably give us a move back into those 26s, right? So 26 level, something like that. Now I think if you're to answer your question more specifically, where would I be looking to build longs, is I think these are really tricky trades, because if you say, oh, I'm only going to buy it under 25, etc., etc., the problem is sometimes you might miss it, because all it takes is one headline on the news wire, etc., and you can get a pretty decent rally. So I would tend to prefer to actually build a position, right? Whether everybody can do it in a different way, looking at different entry points, but I think it's I would prefer to build a position rather than try to wait for a specific price, whether that's below 25, below 26 or 26 or whatever. I think here, if you look at it, right, if you just go back even to something on the monthly, right, clearly the move has been extremely aggressive, and sooner or later it will be healthy to see if we to see some kind of bounce. Keeping in mind the context of the move down, right, even let's say a bounce of this latest move down, right, this latest move down, that crack through that lower end, you could easily see a move back into the 36s, 37s, right? And that's a decent move. That's a $7 move. On a futures contract, that's a pretty decent move. So again, keep in mind this will likely continue to be heavy. What I like here in terms of the technicals is you see that this low here, previous support that we broke back down, right? If you extend this across, you'll see that'll be coming in right here, kind of close to that top end of that channel. So that should probably be the key resistance, key previous support now acting as resistance. So around those 37s, that's something I'll keep an eye out for. And as long as the rallies into that level keep on getting sold, then we would expect to most likely see the market continue to, the move we discussed earlier on, try to make it down back towards that 26 mark, right? So that would be the next level we would be looking at to the downside as long as we hold below here. And if we manage to get some bids, whether you get some headline on the wire or something like that, the level to look at to the upside, we'd say, is that 43.50. That's the first level we would be looking at, right? Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, so that's crude. So silver, next one, silver. So what's going on silver? I don't have a particularly, I haven't been looking at silver recently. I just think it's, you're getting a lot of wheeling and dealing, and you see it's been hovering here. Now, it's a similar thing to crude or all the commodity complex, right? As far as I'm concerned, I think the pot odds or the risk reward or the symmetry in the trade is more related to the upside rather than the downside. But here we're getting an awful lot of choppy trade, right? You see these moves we saw last week, considering the range here, fairly aggressive, but what we would call a lot of velocity of move inside range. So right here, there's not an awful lot to do, right? You see that the pressure to the downside is still there, right? So all these moves down, we're still getting sold, and to a certain extent, it's trying to, to put in some kind of a bottom. I'd still prefer the long side rather than the short side, but I don't know. I don't think there's anything too compelling. Should you see a very aggressive fake out to the downside, so in a very aggressive press lower and then a nice reversal candle, I may be interested to do something. But right here, it just looks like it's in a broader range. So from a shorter term perspective, to me, it's not cheap enough to buy, and it's not expensive enough to sell. If you're looking at it from a position trade or from a longer term perspective, then maybe you can make a case for trying to build some kind of a long. Clearly, we would not understand the rationale to try and build a short at this level. If gun to the head, you need a break to new lows. But right here, I think it's opportunities are either playing the sideways range or trying to place some kind of a bounce to the upside. Does that make sense? Okay, so we got a long question. I'm going to read it out as I read it for the first time, so let's hold it make sense. In short-term is short-term scalping a lower probability success plan in the long term? I've got my head around RR, but in the shorter time frames, the longer time frames require bigger stops. I'm thinking that the better play is the daily or the 4. Here, I think your question, if I can summarize that, is does it make sense to scalp short term because you're inevitably going to get a lot more stop outs and the risk reward is not that great? Isn't it better to focus on a higher time frame like the daily or the 4 hour where you could shoot for bigger risk reward? Okay. I think, as usual, you're going to see with me, you're going to get a lot of answers which are going to be, it depends, right? It really depends on what you're looking at. I think it's too simplistic to discuss it that way, right? I think the focus is that you can't look at percentage win rate or you can't look at risk reward, whether it's planned or effective, in isolation. You have to put them together. So you have to find what fits your trading style, what fits your system, what fits your personality, and then see what happens, because you could have a system with a much higher risk reward where you can afford to have a much lower percentage win rate, or you could have a scalping system maybe where you have even a slightly, a one-to-one risk reward, but or slightly inverse, but you have such a high percentage win rate that it's net profitable. So remember, when you're calculating that kind of expectancy, you have to you have to look at the percentage win rate in line with, right, how much you win when you win and how much you lose when you lose, and then make sense, see if it makes sense for you. But it's a fairly simple math equation, so I wouldn't limit it to specific time frames. I just look at it in a bigger picture. Does that make sense? Okay, good stuff. Okay, so again, anything goes. Any questions, any pair anybody wants to review, just hit them up. Hit them up, hit them up. We'll cover as many as we can. Edwin, yes, sound is on. Okay, so USD CAD, what's going on USD CAD? So again, keep in mind we've got a BOC decision coming up. We've got a lot of wheeling and dealing on crude. What's going on USD CAD? So it's the same way, it's similar to crude, right? We've had this little base here and we shot back up, and it's just been shooting through every single round number, right? Now clearly, no matter what happens, whether they cut rates or not, I'm not a huge fan of trying to get long at highs. I think the opportunities are trying to get short. The way I've been playing this, I've been short-term tactically shorting every failure to hold above a new round number break. That's the way I've been trading it. And here we've had some fairly decent action, nice trading overnight. This is very classical kind of, a Sunday open, low liquidity market, panic over the weekend, bam, we got a lot of these gap ups, gap downs across the board, Kiwi, Aussie, CAD, and they all filled. Very nice trading opportunities. These might be nice shorter term or intermediate term swing highs or lows. Decent little action here. We had a move right into the 145.00 right after, once again, what's happening. This has been very classic action. Bam, we take out a new round number and we fail. We've seen this very similar action, right? So this is Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, right? And you see we're having similar action in these overnight sessions, when we try and gap up, take out a new round number, and then we fail. So, fairly classical. So here, what's going on? I think the 45 is the pivotal level, right? 145.00, the level to watch here shorter term. As long as we hold above, wouldn't be surprised for the market to continue to try and take a stab at the 146, try and take a stab at the overnight highs, at the Sunday open highs, right? And if we can get back below there pronto, then I would not be surprised to see a very quick move back into the 44. Here it looks like it's respecting some kind of a channel. We're getting a very orderly move to the upside, but, sooner or later you'll get some kind of a healthy correction. So we'll have to see how this trades. As far as I'm concerned, going into the week here, shorter term, at least before the rate decision, the range is 146, 145, 144, and pivotal level we're holding there. Just keep in mind today's a bit of a dead session. Anything, you could start to get some moves that get traction, but very limited flows. So I'd be a bit cautious about trying to trade too aggressively, too much here. Okay. Euro AUD, USD, AUD USD, AUD USD. What's going on AUD USD? So here we're having trying to press down a very, very big level, right? Actually, if we look at it, let me get a blank chart here. We'll get back to that chart in a second. If you look the action here on the daily, everything in trend, it's going for a break. This is very, very bearish, right? Very, very bearish. So the big question is, how are we going to trade going into the week? Because normally, after such a break of such a key level here, you'd expect this to really get traction to the downside, as the only way you can look at this as long as it holds below is bearish and heavy, right? So the big question is, why isn't it accelerating, or is it going to accelerate once the Momo and the flows come in? So the way I'd look at this is that, who asked this? Stephen. So as long as this holds below this breakdown zone, this is going to be extremely heavy, and most likely, you know, any rally into is going to get sold for continuation and extension lower. But I would be very, very cautious if early in the week we hold back above this breakdown zone, right back above the 69.00, because then I would not be surprised to see a quick bounce back into the 71s, this descending trend line, 71, 72s, this whole range here. So this is really a key zone. But the only thing you can say, especially as long as it holds below this area, heavy, right? Heavy, as long as it holds below this area. Most people are going to be trying to short bounces into this previous support acting as resistance. Not a trade I like personally for more downside, but if we get back above here, we could easily see some more covering, but clearly it's looking heavy. It's fairly bearish, right? Euro NZD. Ooh, this is going to be a funky one. I don't think I've looked at this in a gazillion years. Euro NZD. So let's see. I hope I'm not blind. Let's hope I can find it on the platform. Euro NZD. Let's do it this way. Euro. Do you have any specific question on the chart? No, I don't look at this. I would never trade this. No. I think I'd much rather express whatever view shows up on this chart. I'd much rather express it through Euro or Kiwi or anyway one of the majors, one of the more liquid pairs. I'm really not interested in trading these pairs. JTrader, do you have any specific comment or question on this chart, or just a general review? So here on the monthly, it looks like we've broken down a key level, then reversed, popped right back up. I hate to fib these moves because there's such a big wick here, right? There's such a big wick, but it looks like we could have put in some kind of a short-term bottom here. It looks like we're kind of holding this 50 back area. So as long as we hold above here, then we could, you know, be seeing trying to go back up, right? Trying to go back up towards that spike high. I really don't like charts that have these kind of wicks, right? If you look at it on the daily also, you know, just look, to me it's just really not that clear. Not a huge fan. It's probably some kind of a retracement here. Let's get on the daily. Let's get some moving crazy lines. Look at it on a weekly. Yeah, you see what's happening here, Jay, on this weekly also, right? This, and again, I'm not a huge fan of fibbing it this way, but you see what's happening. You're getting a lot of confluence here around this 50 back area, right? 50 back area, and you're getting all of the three moving averages, the 50, the 100 coming in line there. So this would, to me, this is the Momo line. This is the Momo area, right? As long as we get daily closes, weekly closes above here, it'll probably be attracted by the spike area. And if it reverses, get daily closes, weekly closes below here, then back heavy. But it looks like, you know, we may have, you know, we may be trying to base off this level to try and retest this zone. Does that make sense? Again, not a pair I trade, not a pair I'm interested in, just reviewing it because somebody asked. What do I think about the growth problems in China for AUD? I have no opinion. I don't want to talk about fundies or stuff here if I can avoid it, right? Just looking at the technicals, I think it's especially for junior traders who are starting out, why make it harder, right? Whether China has growth problems or not, who cares? Aussie, as long as it's holding below here, it's going to be heavy. If it can hold back, if it can get back above, it'll probably see a little pop. Momo line, don't make it harder than it is. It'll catch up with the fundies sooner or later, right? NZD/USD, Kiwi, what's going on Kiwi? Ah, Kiwi, Kiwi, Kiwi. What's happening? So we're kind of stuck in this big range. We discussed this area, right? So we discussed the fact that we expected it to come back to the downside of the range, right? Bottom side of the range. And then if it couldn't break below, try to look for some bouncing opportunities, right? So here, you know, these are the three levels, right? And they have to, for me, they have to remain, these are the three levels, right? As long as we don't get a daily close below, these are the three levels to focus on. So again, clearly, if this holds heavy, you'd expect it to try and want to come out and take out this previous support down here. So the way I'm looking at this, daily closes below, then that next support will come into play. But as long as we can't close below, then the risk is of a little bounce. You know, that'll probably tie in with equities. If equities can bounce a little bit, that could be the play. Clearly, it's heavy, right? It's very broad chop zone. It's been very difficult to read. It's been heavy, but still inside of a choppy area. So I think we're right. You know, pretty much like everything, we're at key pivotal areas. It's a bit early here. Thanks, guys. Obviously, some guys are still retweeting the link. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. So I think here we'll have to see how we trade into the open. Keep in mind, there's a lot of news out this week out of China, out of Australia, out of New Zealand. We got another GDT price auction out, so that could mean a lot of movement coming in. But those are the levels I would focus around and I would use to guide, right? That's what I would be using as a guide. Okay. Good stuff. I made 16% on my account in the past 2 weeks. Would you say that's good enough, good performance? I'd say, what do you think? If you have your money in the bank, you're getting 0%. So yes, I would assume 16% in 2 weeks is pretty darn good. I would assume I would go on a ledge and assume that that is not sustainable, and I would assume that you're not trading one-to-one leverage. I would assume you're probably levered much higher than that, you know, at least 20s, 50s, maybe even the hundreds. So I would say be very careful, because the same way you can make that in 2 weeks, you can lose that in 2 weeks or more. So remember, it's all about not how much you make in a specific period. It's what your risk-adjusted returns are, how much you risk in order to make that. So I would stay away from the Instagram posting, Twitter crazies that pretend it's normal to make 50% a day and that you could live, pay 4 ex-wives, 12 golf memberships, 2 Ferraris and a Maserati off trading a $2,000 account. We know how all those accounts end, and it's not pretty, right? So if you want to have an idea of returns, expected returns, or realistic returns, Jim, I would suggest you click on the link in the top, go on the blog. There's an interview section, and there's 3, 4 interviews, 2 text. There's a couple of video interviews that are hour long that we talk about those things, so you could get a very good feel of that. But so DAX, what's going on DAX? Where's DAX? So again, this is very similar what we discussed in the latest YouTube video, right? You see that we've got all these equity indices. They're all like approaching pretty important support zones, right? So whether you're looking at the ES, whether you're looking at the NASDAQ, right? Whether you're looking at the Dow, whether you're looking at the DAX, right? So do you have a specific question on the DAX, or are you looking for just a general review, right? So here we're coming into a very important support zone. So, you know, the question is what to do. I mean, I think, you know, I don't understand how anybody who's flat would want to initiate shorts here in this major support, right? It doesn't mean it can't go lower, but if it's going to bounce, stuff doesn't only go in one line. This is a pretty decent place for it to bounce. Now, it doesn't mean it can't go down all the way into that 200 before bouncing, but clearly here's a support zone. So I think, similar to the ES, that 200 is going to be downside support, and any bounce will probably get sold well ahead of that 100 DMA, right? So that's what I would be focused on. If you look at it on something like a 4-hour, you see you've got a bunch of gaps, still open gaps here, right? So those will probably, well, actually this is not an open gap, so that might be attracting if it gets a sharp, very aggressive rally, but most likely you'll see it's similar to the ES. You'll see a lot of selling trying to keep the pressure on, but it's a very similar case for all those indices, right? It's just a question of, are they going to bounce, when are they going to bounce, and how sustained is the bounce going to be, right? Just going through the questions. Any other comments, any questions, any chart anybody wants to look at, anything anybody wants to focus on? We don't have any schedule or anything. Anybody just ask, first come, first serve. Yeah, it's probably a good time to discuss that, It's the same way as we said on the ES, right? You've seen the ES coming right back down, and it's basing here, and you've got all those moving averages. So it's very similar to the DAX. So the big question is, how are we going to trade now going into the week? So what we've been focusing on is on a 1-hour chart, right? And if you see here, what's happening is, we've got this low on Thursday, right, where we clipped it 3 times, and then we had that rally, right? The rally when everybody thought that we'd probably put in a short-term bottom, myself included, right? And then this completely retraced in the overnight session, just came back down. This is very surprising to a lot of people, I suspect, myself included. So not that it can't happen, but you would not expect it to do that. So right here going into the week, as the volumes will come, what I'm focused on is, I think we should be focused on, is this low, right? As long as we hold below, then clearly there's a risk of the market trying to come back down and clip those 1850s. Again, there was extremely aggressive buying at that 1850, so that might be the short-term bottom here. And the question is what to look for if we break above those Thursday lows again. I think what will likely attract is that 1900 level, and that 1900, you see this, you've got this channel coming in, so that's going to be a key zone. So I think 1900, that's the first level where you'll see the aggressive bears trying to sell into that. If that breaks to the upside, you've got other zones, but most likely I would not be surprised to see us try and rally all the way back into those 1950s, but rest assured you'll probably see a lot of sellers trying to sell at any kind of bounce. Below those 1850s, then the next level I'd be looking at is you've got those 1812s, 1814s, that next bottom that you need to focus on. But I think here it's just all about Momo flows around this area, around those Thursday lows. Let's see how the market positions, how the orders come in, and what gives. I think that's going to be the focus in here. AUD CAD, no, that's really not something I would normally look at. Do you have a specific question on it? Or just a general review? AUD CAD. So what's going on here? So yeah, I don't know, kind of hovering in the middle of nowhere. Looks like probably here dips might catch some bids. Yeah, if it fails, we might be reverting all the way back to that 50 on the daily. That's a previous resistance area. On the 4 hour, it looks like we've got a lot of wheeling and dealing around this area, right? This is probably going to be the pivotal zone, right? Hold above here from a daily close, and then we could try and take a stab at those highs again, even though they're being defended. We get a daily close back below these 99.30s, then I would not be surprised to see this come all the way back down into the 97s. I'd look at that as a pivotal area, right? Not something I would trade, not something I would really be interested in. Euro GBP, what's going on Euro GBP? Euro GBP. So what's happening here? So very aggressive move, little correction higher, right? I would suspect that, you know, into the year, most people will be looking to express all the long sterling views, all the long so GBP views, preferably through short Euro GBP rather than long cable. So the big question is, you know, how much is this going to correct before you get a decent selling opportunity, right? I think here we're at a key area because you see this previous support that held and then we broke through. So this is going to be a pivotal area. So the way I'd be looking at this and this latest leg down, right, is that either we get sold off aggressively from here, this area holds, and we continue the correction lower, or if we pop higher, there's a risk that we may have to move all the way back up into this 50-60 zone, you know, maybe even a broader correction, much higher correction if you get a lot of squeezy action, again, depending on what happens on the equity side. But these are the areas that I would be broadly looking at for Euro GBP. Let me just go through the questions to see if there's... Yeah, so, you know, here it's just a tricky one because we're getting a lot of wheeling and dealing, but and the tricky thing with these is that if it holds this breakout zone, then it'll probably be very nice sell and it'll behave quite nicely. If it pops above, it's a tricky one. I would not try being aggressive because it could easily move up to any one of these levels in a corrective pattern. So I'm not a huge fan of it here. I prefer wait and see. I don't, you know, I'm not a huge fan. At least I'd wait for the open this week. I mean, to get through to Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday trade. I don't think. I think there are with the volatility, the way we've seen it, there are a lot more interesting opportunities on the equities and the commodities, and then trade locations on a lot of the currency pairs recently. Okay. Okay. Would you comment on brokers in general, specifically MM versus ECN? What things you should look for in a broker, blah, 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 blah. Again, I mean, the only thing I'd say is if you can avoid it, I don't see why you'd want to trade with a broker that's trading against you. That's a market maker, right? I just don't understand why you would ever want to do that, right? So in terms of brokers, you'd want to look for liquidity, broker that's regulated in a proper place, not in some funky country, right? And just be smart. If a broker's offering you $400 if you open a $5 account free, then chances are you probably want to stay away, right? So just you know, if you go on the blog, we have discussions about that, but just try and be smart about it. But regulation is, you know, safety of funds. Regulation is really important, of course. Going through some of the questions. Yeah, if you look on the blog, all those charts with those levels for Kiwi and Aussie are already on the blog. They were posted last week. The charts are the same. So if you just go on the blog in the charts, 2016 charts, you'll find all the charts there. If you don't find any chart, just send me a message on Twitter. I'll post it. But most of them are there. Can you share your checklist to enter into a trade and exit? That's impossible because it depends what you're trading, what system you're trading, right? Everybody's going to have a different system, a different trade. So there's no standard checklist for a trade, right? So just let me know if there's something that you don't find, but they should all be on the blog. Gold, what's going on gold? And again, for all of you who have the general questions, if you look on the blog in the interview section, there's so much content. We've covered through so many of those things. I'd really encourage you to go through that. Gold, what's happening on gold? So do you have a gold chart? Yeah, because we've been looking at this. So gold, Ronnie, I think you've got an issue on your side because the platform is firing on all cylinders and sound is firing on all cylinders. We've got the dashboard. Anybody else? How's sound for everybody else? Perfect, 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 perfect. So should be on your end. Okay. It's funny how people always assume the problem is somewhere else, right? Oh, your sound doesn't work. Okay, so what's going on gold? Gold. So again, we discussed the fact since last week that we were. By the way, Ronnie, one of the what browser are you on? If you're on Firefox, it tends to be better, right? So sound tends to be best on Firefox. And another thing that happens a lot is if you have your email client running, email clients tend to take up a lot of wheeling and dealing fuzzy space in the system. So usually people who have start to hear kind of the sound breaking up or something, if you shut down your internet, whether it's Gmail or Outlook, or you just shut everything else, you've got all the other windows you have open, the sound gets a lot better. It's a classical for not only here, any webinar you listen to. The first thing to do if you've got sound issues, it really helps if you just shut down your email client. You'll see across the board, it's one of the things that tends to cause the more trouble. So let me know if that helps. Okay. So here gold, what we've been saying is that, it's kind of wheeling and dealing. We'll have to see what happens on the hey, thanks, man. What's happening on the equity side? But to us, it just feels that we're still stuck in this 1150s, 1100, and 1050s, right? So we're kind of stuck here, and with this 11 being the pivotal zone, right? And unfortunately, we've got a lot of velocity of move inside range, right? So we're kind of stuck inside this 100 and this 50 DMA. And what we said is we expect that sell to come back into here and hold, and we expect it unless something really either we get a real acceleration to the downside or a capitulation in the markets. This will probably continue to stay choppy inside this range until everybody figures out what's going on here. So I'd have to just make the same call going into this week. A lot of wheeling and dealing inside the 50 DMA and the 100 DMA, short-term daily opportunities to tactical trade inside this range. But overall, unless we get a daily close above the 100 or a daily close below the 50, most likely we'll just see a lot of choppy action, right? we'll see a lot of choppy action. And, if we get the daily close outside that range, then to the downside, we might get that acceleration back to the 1050s as everything, if it's heavy, and if it closes above the 100, implying it's a bit more bid, we'd expect an acceleration back into that 200 DMA, right? Hey man, how's it going? Welcome. You're a bit late. We started probably 38 minutes ago, something like that. Okay. Yeah, and again, remember, there's no. I think this is really important point. I know I sound incredibly boring when I say this, but there's no right or wrong way to really trade, right? What's important, no matter what your system or what your rules are, is to have some kind of systematic way of analyzing the market, some kind of systematic way of trading, and some rules that you respect, right? Then there are a lot of different ways to be profitable. Two people could be in a short and a long at the same time on different time frames, and both make money. I feel that a lot of the people, especially on the forums, on the internet, on Twitter, whatever, spend far too much time trying to argue with people they don't know about, oh, I only use fibs, I only use Elliott waves, oh, I only use this. Use whatever you want, right? As long as it works for you and you have a systematic way of doing it, that's the focus, right? Find something that works, find something that's repeatable and that you can have some kind of structure around it, and then that's okay. Don't worry about what somebody else does. There are a lot of different ways to do things. There's no magical only one way, right? No, I don't look at the dollar per se, or any of the currency baskets. I personally don't. I don't trade anything. I don't look at them. I don't think it doesn't make sense for me. I trade one chart at a time, but again, I don't mind what chart it is. Any chart's the same for me. But I don't trade DX or anything like that. Can we look? Yeah, sure. What's going on at, I think this is a tricky read, but it's basing nicely. So Euro GPB. So it's coming back into this this support. Very nice orderly move down, and we had a nice chance to try and play a little bounce at these lows right into this base, and it just didn't get any traction, but it's still holding, right? So right now, this move, we posted this on the blog, we had very nice move all the way back here, and now guess what? This downside is the pivotal level, right? So look at action around here. If we get a daily close below the support, then I would expect price to try and take a very quick stab back down and break to new lows. As long as we don't get a daily close below that support, then I would expect we've got a risk of a little bit of bouncy action, possibly all the way back down into that breakdown zone. Again, a lot is going to link to what happens on the equity side too, but I think that's the risk we have. But a lot of, it's not really getting traction, a lot of chop around this key area, right? Yeah, very, very interesting. Okay, cool. Any comments, any questions, any other chart we haven't looked at, any chart anybody wants to look at? We've done a bunch of pairs. We've done pretty much most pairs, I think. Anything else? More than happy to tackle anything. Again, very slow market, so more than happy to stay on as long as people have questions. Hey, Alan, Hannah. I haven't even checked who's in a lot of usual suspects. Hey, hello to all the guys from the weekly. Good stuff. What's going on cable? Cable, we haven't looked at cable. Well, cable's holding extremely heavy. And again, sooner or later when cable trades like this, it just causes an extreme amount of pain. And usually the snapback is just as painful, right? But I still think that probably in terms of a long-term perspective, I'd much rather position myself long GBB by being short Euro GPB rather than long cable. Again, we'll have to see. Remember, you've got a lot of ways of expressing similar views, the same view if you're looking from a position trade. So right here, we've got an aggressive move back down, and we're coming into, similar to the equities, a very, very important support zone, right? Of course, this is a gigantic area, right? Because you've got this where 142s and this downside area is at 133s, 134s, whatever. So it's a tricky one to call, but especially once we started to break down here, it's not something you want to catch too aggressively. I think here's the first area when we've started to see some interesting action trying to base at these lows. What I would be looking at is you see this most recent run lower here, right? And it looks like it's trying to base. So I think in a similar fashion to a lot of the other charts we've looked at, and you see how it's pretty much the same chart across the board. You've got this low, which is coming right into this area, this support, which is the market tried to defend, then we broke down previous support, acted as resistance, smacked down, and now we're holding. So as long as these lows hold from the overnight, I'd expect the market to slowly try and come back into this breakdown zone and that mid-range. I think it's still heavy unless we trade back above there, so the risk is the market of trying to sell any rally for another test lower. But if we can get back above there, then we could start to see that sharper velocity of move for a bigger correction back into the 145. Remember that 145 has been super important, very, very interesting zone, very pivotal area. So that's the way I've been looking at it. Again, clearly, if you're flat, I don't see how you could possibly try to get short here. But it doesn't mean it's an awesome long either, because you could have got in a lot of trouble trying to catch the bottom on this. It looks like it's trying to base. I think here the play today was really, especially if you traded the Sunday open, and these opens tend to be the interesting ones after when we've got some extreme moves. There are a lot of opportunities, right? Whether it was the long on cable, whether it was the long on Aussie or Kiwi, the short on CAD, there were a lot of interesting gap plays. So we'll have to see how these things settle, but clearly far from being an easy chart to trade here, right? Even to the short side, because sooner or later you want to cover your I mean, you could have trailed quite a lot, but I think it was not that easy to trade. I'm sure there's somebody who's going to say it was super easy, but there you go. Any other comments, any questions, any chart anybody wants to look at? GPB, JPY. Do you have a specific question on that? Or, it's going to be very similar to cable, right? Just getting bazookered, getting smashed, right? So here on this retracement, sloppy double bottom all the way back here, you've got a sloppy hold of the 50 to 61.8. Because of the double bottom, we'd expect this to ultimately break to the upside, right? So I think here, if anything, also to answer Rick's question, if you want to have some kind of support in terms of a broader, I'd be looking at this kind of support here, this previous resistance acting as support, protecting that fib. You see you've got other areas where the market tried to hold it here, right? If you're looking at it in terms of the weekly, you've got that 200 coming in, right? See, it's coming in that area. So that's a whole area of interest. Now, this is a tricky one because you don't know how it's going to bounce or whatever, but it's the same thing as cable. It's extended. The healthy thing would be to see some kind of a bounce action. The question is, where is that area going to come? And in like cable, you've got very, very strong support, but it's still a bit further down. So I think it's starting to approach a possible bounce zone. I don't understand how you could possibly try and get short here. You'll probably see sellers trying to come in on every bounce, but I think short term, you know, post Brexit risk, et cetera, this should probably try and get some bids, even though most likely the market will try and be a seller into any one of these zones, right? Does that make sense? What FX Pro demo account are you using there? Jim, I'm not sure I understand the question. It's if it's an FX Pro demo account. Are you talking? Oh, it's an MT4. Sorry. Okay, it's an MT4. Okay. Comments, questions, shoot. We already covered that earlier in the session. Do you use pending orders, market orders, or both? Again, it depends on what your strategy, but I think if you can afford I prefer to use some kind of market limit order, just the market order, right? So I prefer a limitable market order, right? I'm not a, if you can. I've never tried MT5. I wouldn't know, Jim. I'm sorry. I couldn't possibly comment. I've never tried MT5. Yeah, we covered that Euro AUD at the beginning of the session, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll post the recording on the blog afterwards. Ronnie, we covered the ES at length. It's going to be in the recording. So I'll be posted right after we finish. I think we've done pretty much every pair. So if anybody has any questions, trading related questions or stuff, I can answer them. But I think we've covered pretty much every pair under the sun. What is the Adobe software I'm using for the room? It's Adobe Connect. And no, it's not free. Yeah, we did Euro JPY. Yeah, the recording will be posted as soon as we finish. It should be okay in 2 seconds. Well, as long as it depends how long it takes YouTube to load it, right? Jim, it depends what package you've got, how many people you want to have in the room. It can cost anything from, I don't know, $100 to 500 to 700. I don't know. It depends on what package you have. Okay, guys. Looks like we've pretty much covered every pair under the sun. I'd like to thank you all for flying with 50 for a little bit today. I hope that was useful. I'll post the recording. It should load quickly. And remember, there's a bunch of stuff on the blog, a bunch of interviews. Don't hesitate to go through that. It's all free and it should be helpful. Have an awesome one, guys. Thank you so much. Take care and talk to you guys soon.